Okay, let's see if we can get some sort of a tutorial going here. I'm going to be compressing a lot of info into a short amount of time to show you the basics, and I'm going to try to stick to the basics and not wander off too far. But this is After Effects. After Effects, you'll have your composition here, which means you'll have your video here, and down here will be all of your layers. And over here will be your project files, which are your PNGs, JPEGs, videos, etc. You also have tools like Move Tool, Hand Tool, Pen Tool, Text Tool, etc. So in order to get started, my method to get started is make sure that project is active, because our project files are going to go here. And here we go. Here's our project files. We have a Napoleon Dynamite GIF, we have another video, and we have ARC Sleazy Salesman. So make sure all of these are selected. And you can't see, but I'm dragging them down to the After Effects icon in the taskbar and dropping them into the project. Now you have to make sure project is active in order to drag them in here. The other way is to go File, Import, and import file or multiple files. You can do it that way. I just find this way to be very easy. So now we click on the Napoleon Dynamite thing and you can see it come up here. So that way you have the right file. For example, if you clicked on that, you can see this guy and you know you're not on the right file. So we click on this, and it's about a 1.5 video or something like that, and drag it down to this icon, and it will automatically make a new composition. So as I said, down here are your layers. We have just the video file right now, and we have the video here. So if we scrub it, it shows the video. You can press spacebar and it will play it, or you can drag it from frame to frame. So as you see, he's just doing the arm thing, whatever the hell that's called. And what we want to do is drag Sleazy Arc on top. So we drag him to the top. And now we have Sleazy Salesman on top of the video. We need to resize him. And in order to resize him, you have to start resizing and then hold Shift. It's a little different from Photoshop. And we're just going to eyeball it to maybe a little bigger than that. Yeah, about that big. That looks pretty good. Alright, now what we have to do is, just like in Photoshop, we have to have Arc's head follow this guy's head. And it may be just a little tricky because he raises his head right there. And that's going to just look a little funky, so we'll probably have to do some adjustments for that. Now, what we want to do is on top of Arc, we want to put a layer new null object on top of Arc. Don't worry about what that is right now. It'll make sense in just a minute, or at least kind of sort of some sense. Now we want to track his face. We want to track the motion of his face, and that'll make keyframes of where his face is. So in order to do that, we press on top of the video layer and we go to the tracker. Now if your tracker isn't here, you can go to Effects and Presets and type in tracker and it'll pop up. So what we're doing is we're doing a simple tracking. We're just tracking motion, up, down, left, and right. So we make sure track motion is selected, and that will automatically select the layer that's selected, which is happy or whatever. Now, let me zoom in. I'm zooming in with my mid mouse button. This is your tracker point. And I looked at this thing before, and I first thought that the eye would be a good place to track because it has a good contrast. But watch what happens is closes his eye, and now we lose that, so it's not going to track very well. And this being a GIF, this is really hard to track because you got all these blotches and junk, so it's not really well defined. So I'm going to try right here, and I'm also going to expand this outside part. Wait till watch when it turns white. Now you can expand the outside part upwards some, right about there. And the reason I'm doing that, I'll tell you in a second. Okay, this part right here is keying in on that V shape in his mustache, right there. So we're going to put it right there, and it also keys in on data out in this area. But this thing will also catch overflow. Now you don't want the outside to be too big because it'll track really, really slow. So you want to keep these as small as possible, but big enough. Okay, so we go to our first frame, and we're going to press this button right here, which will analyze forward. What that'll do is it'll try to go from this point to like this point. It'll try to follow that as much as possible, and it'll put keyframes in each frame. So let me hope for the best. It's always hope for the best when you're tracking, because you never know if it's going to work right. So here we go. We press analyze forward, and it worked. It worked good the first time, and that's always a good sign. So as you see, the tracking point is staying in that V, or whatever it's called, of his mustache, and that's really good. We got lucky. Now we have to take this tracking data and we have to apply it to something. We're going to apply it to this null object. I'm not going to explain why, but this is just the way you do it. So make sure we apply it to the null object. We already have down here the target is the null object, null1. Null1, that's your target. If it's not set to null1, you can always go to edit target and make sure that it's set to null1. So we could set it to arc or null1, but we want it on null1. So we press OK. Now we have this tracking data set to go to null, and we apply it. And this thing comes up and says, do you want to apply to the dimensions x and y? X and y will be up, down, left, and right, or whatever. You just say OK. Now, we are in... Yes, we're back in the composition. Sorry, I had a little brain fart. And the tracking data is on null object 1, null1. Now, in order to get that data onto Arkedo's head, we're going to put the eyeball on so he's shown. We use this thing right here. This is called a pickwick. I can never say that damn thing. Pick whip. You take it and plop it to there. Now remember, this has the tracking data. So what we're doing is we're applying that tracking data to the arc head. Now the arc head should move according to our tracking data. And it does. Very good. Now it gets really high, and that's what I was worried about. Remember I said he lifted his head up? But we could manually fix that. It's kind of a pain in the ass, but at least we got damn good tracking data, so we're good. I mean, we're not going to have to do every single frame, but we'll have to do some. So what we do is we go to the Arkedo layer, open it up, and we go to transform. And this is where you make your keyframes for your position, scale, rotation, and anchor point. These are all pretty self-explanatory. I'm not going to explain anchor point, but what you want to do is click on all of them. I'm clicking and just dragging down. It's called a scrub, and that puts a keyframe right here. Keyframes on frame 1. And we just go. And it's looking good, looking good, looking good. Okay, now it's starting to get up too high. So let's go back and make a positional keyframe right here. And there's a few ways you can do it. You can click this button right here, and it'll make a positional keyframe. Or, let me delete that. I just tend to go left and right with the arrows, and that makes a positional keyframe. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and that's with your mid mouse button. And I believe Control Plus does the same thing. Let's wait for it to get up pretty high. And I'm taking Shift and down arrow, and I'm moving it down some. I'm just guessing. So we have a... Yeah, okay. Let's fix that downward motion. I'm doing left and right to make a keyframe there, and I'm going to adjust this one. So I'm just moving up with my arrow key, and make sure these are close, which they are. That's pretty good. And we keep going, and now it's getting up into the left a little bit. So I'm using my down arrow and right arrow to correct that. And you know what? That's all I'm going to do. You can get in there and wiggle around each frame and get it perfectly. That's what I would do personally, but for this we're just going to leave it at that. Now to move this upward, you press your space bar and hand tool, and that'll be able to move this wherever you want. So you can, let me just show you a little bit of movement. Zoom in, I'm sorry, zoom out, zoom in, and move. Now let's just look at that and see how it looks. Looks pretty good. That would have been about, I don't know, 45 seconds of work, if that, to do all that tracking. So now we have him, moved pretty darn good. What we have to do next is this masking. We have to make sure this hand goes over his face. And I picked this because it's not too many frames. Now, what we could do is we could mask out Ark, and in this case, it might be the best to do that. But I tend to do this. I tend to make a copy of the video. Now, to make the copy of the video, you can press Control C or Control V, but Control D does it in AE. Don't ask me why. And you put that on top. And the reason I do that is if I have multiple heads down here, it's just easier to make a mask on one layer than, let's just say, 10 Ark heads or however many Ark heads I have. Now, masking is pretty confusing, but we'll work it out. Right now I have this layer clicked off, but we'll click it back on. You go here to Layer, and you make a color fill. What's it called? Solid. I'm sorry, solid color layer. And the color doesn't matter at all. You just want a solid layer. And that's what we're going to make our mask on. We're going to make our mask on this solid layer. I'm not going to explain why. Like I said, I'm just going to show you how. Now, we don't want this to show. We want the video to show. And let's see. Probably that frame. Let me take this off so I can see Ark's head. Yeah, that frame's good. That frame is the first frame that we want to put the mask on. So I'm turning the video back on. And we have to go to Tools. Remember we had the tools? And you have all this stuff? This is your pen tool. This is what I generally will use for masking. Now I'm going to zoom in a little bit and just pen around his hand. And I'm going to go pretty sloppy because I don't want to take a lot of time and do this properly. But you can take your time and do all you want. If you want to round corners, you press your Alt and drag. And you can round corners. And you can move these things. You can add a point here. Let's just, oops, I missed it. Very sensitive to where you can add points. And you can just say, I don't know, move that down or whatever. We'll round this corner off a little bit. But like I said, I'm just doing this really sloppy. And we want to make a keyframe for the mask because we're going to change that in the next few frames. It's going to have to move. So in order to make keyframes for the mask, you click that, you go to Masks, and this is a green mask. Now you can work in this color if you want, but I tend to work in like a lime green, or sometimes I work in a fuchsia type color. But you see, that's just a lot easier for me to see. And we want to see the mask and its keyframes and its properties, so we do the same thing. We make a scrub, and that puts all the keyframes here. You have your mask expansion, opacity, feather, and path. We're mainly going to be working in path because, excuse me, this is the path. We're mainly just going to be changing the path. Now, if we go back a frame, we don't want the mask there because it'll go over Ark's head. So we can just double click it, and that puts this box around it, and just whip it off screen. This is off screen right here. And let's go back to this frame. And this frame is duplicate. And that's pretty cool because what you can do is take this path keyframe, Control C, Control V, and you can duplicate it right there. Now we go to the next one. And you see his hand goes really high. So we double click this and bring it up. And let's zoom out just a little bit. And press enter. Now we got to get these things active again with the pen tool, and this is what I call jump starting. You take a node that's kind of out of the way, press Alt, and you just get it going like that. I call that jump starting, and I'll refer to it as jump starting from here on out. So we just kind of trace around, and if you wanted to, you can make nice round shapes, but I'm not going to worry about that for this tutorial. And you can see over here and over there. And let's just check it. Let's take off the video, and we're barely good. Let me just pull it down just a little bit. There we go. So now we have this keyframe where it's off, this keyframe where the mask is on, and we have another frame. And we go to the next frame, and we do the same thing. Move it. take the pen tool, jump start, and wiggle. Oops. I clicked off of this node, so it made another mask. So I'm Control Z to get rid of that. And just move these around. And we're going to do that for, I don't know, however many frames. And here we go. Let's move that down. And we take this and jump start it. Wiggle. And maybe that's the last frame. No, I think we're going to have to go down to that one. We'll just do that. And this frame and the next frame are duplicates, so we do the same thing. Control, see how this is active? We can Control C and Control V. And keep moving this thing around. Now this might work. From here to here we have some steady motion. So maybe we can bring that up, and maybe we'll get lucky and have it fill in the blanks. Let's go there. Okay. Yeah, pretty close. Sometimes you get lucky and it works perfectly, and you get what's called a tween. But we got close. And we'll take this frame, Control C, Control V. Double click, move all this up. And you can bend these around and make them as accurate as you want, but like I said, I'm just doing this sloppy for the tutorial. Oops, I don't know what happened. I clicked wrong. Double click, double click, double click. There we go. And move that. And that'll probably be the last frame. Okay, that's good because the hand is out of the way. Now we double click and we whip that out of the way. So there's our mask. Let's go over it from the first frame. Bam! It comes in, and I'm moving that down, and it just follows that hand. So we're going to mask that hand over Arkedo's head. Now, in order to do that, we have our mask on the black solid layer, but we want to apply it to the video. And in order to do that, all you have to do is click this button right here and go to Alpha Matte. And now we're gold. We're done. One problem right there. You see how hard the edges are? It looks like junk. But what we can do is go to our black solid layer and go to Masks and make sure we're on this keyframe because that's where the feathering is. And we'll just keep feathering it till it looks good. That's a pretty large mask, large feather, but yeah, that looks okay. And let me zoom out with my mid mouse button, and when I press spacebar, it'll play. And there's our GIF. Now that would have taken, I don't know, a couple of minutes, maybe less, maybe a little more, but not very long. And we have a 1.5 seconds of video. So if you can do, let's just say, 1 second in 2 minutes, you could theoretically do a 30-second GIF in an hour. Now this is really easy, so I doubt you'll be able to do it. But let's recap. Let's recap what we did. We clicked on the video layer. We went to track motion. We placed this thing. Remember we did it like that, there. And we, what's it called? Analyzed it. We made sure that our target was the null object, and we applied it to the null object. So now the tracking data is applied to the null object. We pick whipped this to the null object, and that makes Arkedo's head move in sync. Let me close this because this is our tracker window and this is our composition. So it opened a new window for the tracker. So now Ark's head is moving in unison, and we did have to dial Arkedo's head in with a few keyframes. Well, 4 keyframes. That's not bad. That's actually pretty darn good. Then we took a black solid, put it on top of the video, made our masks, and remember we put a good feather on this one. You may not have to do that. I mean, generally the lowest I will go is like 2 or something like that. 12 is kind of high. I've gone as high as 20 when there's like let's say motion blur. You have to do a pretty big feather. Then we feathered it, and that was it. So let me go over that one more time, a little faster. Click on this, track motion, set your point, press this to analyze forward, make sure your target is a null object, apply it to the null object, make sure you pick whip Arketo to here, and dial him in. That's done. Make your mask, let me close this. Make your mask on the black solid, like that. Feather it. Make sure the video that's underneath is set to an alpha matte. Now, another thing I wanted to show you was this one real fast. I'm probably not going to do much to it, but I just want to show you another thing. You'll see he has two hands going over his face. Two different hands. And arms. So you may have to make, let's just say, here, a mask for this one. And this one right here, you would feather considerable amount because it's very blurred. You'd have to make a mask for this hand, a mask for that hand. And depending on how it goes, yeah, you could probably use the same mask for this hand, but you still may want to make another mask for that. It may be easier. And then another mask for that hand. So you may have to do multiple masks. And that's why I wanted to show you this one. See, now you have his arm, and you may even have to make another mask for that. So let me go back to the Napoleon Dynamite one. So where you have your masks on the black solid, we only have one. But you can make another one. And to do that, you just go to Tools, and you just make another mask. And double click to change the color. And that's it. And you can have, you know, many masks on a single image. I don't know, the most I've ever had was 6 or 7. Anyway, that's it, and I hope you kind of understand this stuff. Yeah, we're all done.